All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the InterDrone Podcast, your 30,000-foot view of the commercial drone industry. My name is CJ Smith, joined today with my colleague, Michael Pehel. We have two fantastic guests with us, Andrew Elefant of Kittyhawk and Kara Murphy. She is a writer, artist, photographer, and contributor to InterDrone. So how are you both doing today, guys?
Pretty good. It's a beautiful day where I am, so I can't complain.
And I'm in the suburbs of San Francisco, and it oddly for mid-May has been raining and cold the last couple of days, which is a little unusual for California in May, but otherwise doing pretty well.
And Mike and myself coming to you guys from the New York City area. We actually had a little bit of snow, bizarre enough, on Saturday in between the sun. So never a dull moment in today's climate, but we're excited. We have a couple of great news stories to get to today. We'll just dive right in. So DJI in the news again, the Matrice 300, touted as one article put it, the coolest drone, which you will never get to fly. This is basically made for inspections, installing installations like power lines, railroad tracks. Some of the specs has 4 rotors. It can fly for up to 55 minutes on a single battery charge. The range is a lot longer. It can actually send footage up to 15 kilometers back and stream that footage. So pretty excited to see a big announcement, especially after the Mavic 2.
So
initial thoughts?
I had to say something when you sent the link to that article. As a writer, I thought, that is the most clickbaity title I've ever seen. Like, really? Yeah, it's out of the price range for hobbyists, obviously, but if someone's running a serious drone services business, then no, it's going to be an investment. And if they have the right connections to fulfill those kind of orders, then yeah, they're going to fly it. But anyway, I had to laugh at that title because writers, we try to avoid that. But anyway.
Marketers don't.
My kind of response to that is, hopefully it's not never. Hopefully I will be able to fly it at some point. But I kind of echo what Kara's saying. I think it's impressive that in this climate that we're still getting new hardware and more capable hardware, and I think it's very clearly a real enterprise type of aircraft and airframe, and sure, it's overkill for hobbyists, but Kittyhawk has a lot of customers that are doing very kind of mission critical type of work, and this is something that'll help them do their job. So I'm curious to see it out in the wild and before too long.
I was excited when I saw this because we were talking, I think about a month ago, about whether or not DJI's innovation kind of period is over, and it seems like they really came to market with some thoughtful products, and that they had been kind of baking these for a while. I do kind of look at this thing almost as like the trash can Mac Pro. Do you remember that device? That was it was basically a PC that not a lot of people would buy, but it had everything and it was kind of overkill. I'm curious to see how many enterprise users actually adopt this, whether or not it will be the public safety segment that adopts it first, because it kind of seems like it would be really cool or tailored for that type of use. And just also, working with enterprise clients, are they still, the majority of them, toe in water, scaling up their programs, or are they going to be at the level in the next year or so where they're buying, more than a dozen of these per program? And that's probably going to be on the low end to get started, right? So this is just to show that I think that DJI is still innovating and they could still kind of be leading the technology rather than thinking in volume. Any disagreements on that, or am I being
controversial? No, I think it's a really fantastic iterative product. I think your analogy to the trash can Mac is a good one. I read the specs on this, and there's a lot of a lot of impressive hardware on it. That they're not really recreating the wheel, but putting it all in one aircraft and one airframe is definitely impressive. And I agree with what you're saying that, you may be seeing kind of people dip their toe in the water and see kind of how much more capable this is than previous hardware. But I could also see some drone programs that are doing, utilities and kind of heavier infrastructure. They might go out and depending on the sophistication of the drone program, they might go out and get a whole bunch of these.
It definitely hit the cool factor for me. Like just kind of pouring over the chips and flips. On it. It's like, how many things can we stack into one box, type of deal.
The nature of that kind of work, the closer they can get to an hour-long battery life as well.
Right. The battery life.
That was really impressive to see, especially for more sophisticated operations and, BV loss operations. A 55-minute battery time is seriously impressive, and I think unlocks a lot of operations that you just can't do with a 25-minute battery life.
Yeah, and then battery life has been the battle for forever, but how much further can you get with it? Like another 45 minutes, and then you start getting into piloting fatigue, and you start getting into different territory. We really need to talk about fully automated systems anyway. So if DJI keeps pushing the boundary, if other drone manufacturers look at this as like an opportunity to kind of push forward themselves, we'll be reaching that upper limit probably within the next 2 years. And, that's been kind of one of the dreams since I got started in this industry 6 years ago now.
Right, because battery capacity has been such a limiting factor all across the board.
Right, and it's got to be a limiting factor selling to enterprise, right? Just the, these little kind of toy operations, 30 minutes, we'll just use the helicopter.
Yeah.
Right. But suddenly once you have something that can fly long distances, 15 kilometers, stay up for an hour, and requires, a real professional to be operating it, it's just a different kind of approach to be considering adding that to your operation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also on this drone, they have, it's called dual pilot mode. So they like it to basically a driver going through driver's ed, where an instructor can sit there and have, they can take over the steering. Is this common in a lot of these enterprise drones? And how important do you guys think this is for both training and just for safety precautions?
I think it started with the Inspire 2, and they named it Master Slave. So there's the master remote. And I think what I saw in the article too is, and I think this has always been the setup with dual remote, if someone loses connection, then the other person can take over and continue to fly the drone. I think that's the most important safety feature, besides possibly training someone, working with someone who might find themselves in a precarious situation and not have the experience. I mean, I've flown near tall buildings myself and thought, oh no, sometimes you get moments of panic. So this is a great feature, especially when you think of all the money you have up there in the sky. I mean, this is not a cheap drone. This isn't something inconsequential where, if you crash a Mavic Air 2, you're out $800. But something like this, if there's damage, then that's a lot more substantial. So, but as I recall, it started with not even Inspire 2. I'm sorry, the Inspire series of drones, I believe. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, though.
That sounds right.
That's actually a really great, protecting yourself from, losing the drone. That's it's a big financial investment, like you said. Mm-hmm. When I heard it, though, I was thinking training purposes, which is another thing that we're looking at. If we're trying to scale enterprise operations, we got to get past like our PC master race phase of the drone industry, where it's only the drone nerd who, the person who's piloting the program in the first place and sold it to his boss, who's doing the flights, and anything that kind of helps that transition for getting more people into your drone program, I think is helpful too. So it's covering it on both fronts. That's a really interesting feature.
Yeah, the training aspect of it is really interesting because, there's a gulf between someone who just goes out and has their Mavic and their Part 107 versus someone who can really operate something in a very kind of sophisticated enterprise setting. And so the training aspect of getting people up to speed and being able to operate a platform like that is really important. I think the safety aspect is also really important, but I think the other really important part of the platform is that because you have two pilots, one can be doing things that are more someone can be utilizing the sensors on that at the same time as someone who's flying. So if you're doing something with thermal or with another type of sensor that an aircraft such as this can hold, you're really expanding your capabilities when you have that type of two operator setup.
Right. As there's more technology, more cameras, sensors on board, it's going to take more time to use them all and to get the data they're trying to get. Somebody has to be focused on flying it and making sure you're getting near the objects you're inspecting and so forth.
So we got drone co-pilots now is what we're saying.
Yeah. So kind of on the note of obstacle avoidance and flying safely, we're going to jump into this next article. So essentially a new kind of technology has been created for obstacle avoidance, and they've actually taken it from everyone's favorite insect, the mosquito. So essentially how it works is mosquitoes flap their wings and they create lift similar to like a downward rotor in a drone. And what they've learned is that the mosquitoes actually are able to sense the downward kind of propulsion that they're creating, and they're able to kind of monitor how that airflow is bumping into objects, and it allows them to kind of have a good idea of if they're approaching something based on that change in airflow. They're actually calling aerodynamic imaging. So it just helps to allow them where the ground is or other obstacles they're seeing. So we're starting to see this kind of make its way into drones. It's kind of an interesting breakthrough. What are your guys' thoughts on kind of how this technology will be used for obstacle avoidance? Is this something that is brand new to you guys, or have you heard this before? And how funny is it that we're getting kind of drone ideas from our friends, the mosquitoes?
Well, reading this about mosquitoes, it explains a lot.
How they don't run into everything.
Yeah, and how they know where to land, right? And you barely feel anything until they're off you, and then you realize that you've been bitten if you haven't put on the proper repellent. That's more of a memory growing up here. But what I would mention is I have a friend, Jesse Mooberry, works for Airbus, and their company is basically creating the maps of how delivery drones are going to coexist, as well as drones that transport people around. And, this is going to be something that we focus on in the future. I mean, Elon Musk may be talking about building a super tunnel in California. I can't remember what it's called, but, there's going to be a lot more drones in the sky in the coming decades. And so having this kind of technology is really imperative. We don't want to, and they talked about in the article also applying it to helicopters. Well, we know that, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant, helicopters well to operate safely. So the more they can work on technology like this, I think the better it's going to be for a lot of aviation. So kudos to these scientists.
Yeah, I thought this was a really interesting article. I think to Kara's point, the autonomy and safety aspect of this is really important. As I think all of us are seeking to see more drones in the air and see that there's a lot more operations taking place. Being able to have technology that'll enable those operations to be done both more autonomously and more safely is definitely a draw. And so I think it's interesting that they're taking it from from mosquitoes. And I thought the other kind of nerdy, interesting part about the article is that It's said that mosquitoes are exploiting ground effect, which is a concept from the aviation world, where if you're flying really close to the ground, you're taking advantage of efficiencies and an increased lift and drag. And so I think it's fascinating that we're kind of triangulating between things that we see out in the wild, things that have worked in an aviation setting previously, and we're bringing all of this new information and new way of thinking into making the drones that we use safer and in their operations.
Right. And to your point on ground effect, it said that when the researchers took that into account, they realized a mosquito could detect surfaces over 20 wing lengths away, which is pretty remarkable when you think about how far that is away, and considering how much how much air propulsion the mosquitoes are actually creating is probably not a ton, because they don't weigh that much. So being able to sense something that far away is pretty incredible.
It's interesting you say that. Thinking about, let's say, like a creature like an ant who can lift, like 100 times its body weight, whatever the actual figure is. Right. So that has to do with square laws and cube laws. So it has to do with mass, essentially. At some point, the cube law takes over, and that's kind of one of the reasons why a lot of the UAM, AAN air taxi models that are proposed are more than ludicrous, is because basically spinning that fast at that mass electrically causes problems. So, but on this point, on the mosquito kind of example, it's still kind of phenomenal, because we're thinking of in terms of nature kind of guiding our scientific process, which is really where science was birthed from anyway. It's naturalism being applied with the scientific method. So that's really what we're doing here. And this is still in research, right? Like, this is not like on a proprietary product.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's probably good on another front too, because I think the biggest thing for us as a community is having new forms of collision detection, sense and avoid technologies that are universally kind of applicable across industries within, or segments within the drone industry, across manufacturers. So we could kind of get a base level of safety that makes it easier for enterprises to make these purchases.
Yeah, I think it's important to just have a number of these kind of these technologies on board a drone, right? One of these technologies may detect and avoid better, if in wind or rain or fog, and the other may do better in another scenario. So just kind of having multiple technologies on board is obviously, I think, paramount as well.
Andrew, how often do enterprise customers talk about safety? Is that like one of their primary concerns, or are they concerned more about data integration or failure rate or things like that?
To answer your question, I think those are the two things that we talk about more than almost anything else with enterprise customers, is safety and things like data integrity and compliance issues. So to the extent that we're making, that we can do anything to make operations safer is really important. I mean, if you have a large enterprise drone program, they're very safety conscious, very risk averse. They've made big investments or thinking about making big investments in a drone program. And so to the extent that that's something, we see that kind of across the board, that one of the reasons that they approach Kittyhawk is that they want to do their operations as safely as possible, and their considerations are really around mission critical processes and capabilities. The aspect of being safe and secure in their operations are really important to this subset of drone operators.
So we have a couple articles on delivery. These two examples are more just kind of bringing up ideas that people are having around the world. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about what we spoke about in the previous week that's been happening in Florida and Virginia Beach. But here in Wombourne, England, a dentist was reported to the police after using drones to deliver medication. Similarly, not too far away in Ireland, an Irish pub was actually in a rural area, 30 miles north of Dublin, was actually delivering closed bottles of wine and closed cans of beer. We've seen in Florida and in Virginia Beach, Drone Up, UPS, CVS have partnered to deliver prescriptions during the pandemic. And I think, Andrew, we'd love to hear a little bit about some of your thoughts on this. Obviously, regulation impacts kind of drone deliveries immensely, but we're seeing more of them happen. Two mixed responses. I mean, where do we stand right now in the regulatory framework with regards to deliveries? And what do you make of some of these more or less pilot projects or kind of innovative ideas that small businesses are trying to do?
Sure. So, I mean, first and foremost, I love seeing the creativity and the innovation and the proof of concept that that some of these operations are trying to demonstrate. I mean, I think that it's important that that people are thinking creatively and thinking about ways to push the envelope in a safe way that allows people to do more with their drones. So from that side of things, I think this is all really interesting and it's impressive to see. I think the big the big dichotomy that I see in this is the difference between things that are just a proof of concept and just kind of a one-off type of thing versus something that's truly scalable. Because I think that that's really the dividing line between things that we should be pushing forward more on, whereas those are things that can truly solve problems like the drone delivery of prescription meds and some of these operations that have come out of the pilot programs in the U.S. And so on those, I think those are really important and those are really great to see that they are solving a real problem and doing so in a way that looks to be scalable. I kind of contrast those sometimes with some of these operations that that may just be trying to do delivery under Part 107, and those are really interesting, but I think they really suffer from the limitation of being particularly difficult to scale, and I think that that's one thing that the industry really needs to focus on, and I think you see that in terms of some of the more advanced companies that are doing this is they're seeking to solve a problem versus just trying to demonstrate something that could be done.
Yeah, so you think of Google's Wing, a company of that magnitude is obviously, they're testing out their delivery drones in Virginia. And, they're making, I can't remember the figure, but they're making thousands of deliveries. But again, they have the manpower and they have the fleet of drones to make this possible. Whereas pubs and independent dentists, not something, as Andrew says, that's really scalable. On a side note, I really feel for the people of Ireland because the pub is their social hub. It's such a huge part of their culture. And so
community center, essentially.
Yeah. So it's just so devastating. And whatever helps these places stay in business and keep up business as much as possible during this pandemic, I'm all for. But I just find it so unfortunate that this is happening. Although I read in the article about the Irish delivery, one guy said, the drone wouldn't even take off or it had trouble because it was so windy. And I thought, okay, no, this is for a regular remote pilot, this is kind of an issue of common sense. And when you think of people using these creatively, also just the educational part, them going through the drone's manual and understanding that, if the wind is higher, or the wind is at a certain speed, maybe, especially if you're carrying something, shouldn't be flying it around. But
yeah. So I tend to be more on the open side and pushing innovation. But I think I would have to say for there's a whole cohort of listeners that if I didn't make a statement about, safety here, and learn what is actually capable before you even try to experiment on this level. And I think there's some issue from CAAs globally not being able to communicate how dangerous these devices can be if they're used in an unsafe manner. That kind of leads to, this dentist thinking, oh, I could just send drugs with this, no problem. Not even thinking about the multitude of laws that are involved there. And again, kind of going to good intent and also seeing the result and saying, what's wrong? Everything's fine here. The person who needed to get their drugs got their drugs. But thinking in terms of scaling that actually nationally, if every actor who just wanted to do the right thing was doing it, then we would have a very dangerous and unsafe sky. Mm-hmm. So there's that balance there that kind of has to be taken into account before we engage in any type of operation like this. And I bet the dentist is not using the word operation. They're just saying, yeah, I flew the drugs over there. So that kind of just shows the divide even between us as inner circle drone community and just the outside world who thinks drones are cool and is thinking of cool ways to use them.
There was a bit of a non-apology from that dentist too. I guess we thought a little bit too far outside the box, and I apologize for that. It was almost like he was saving face. I apologize for thinking a little too far outside the box. And I thought,
right, yeah,
I'm a visionary.
A little bit of that British dry humor was coming out of it.
Yeah. Well, no, and the way that the police came and spoke to us, I thought, oh God, that's such a British thing, because my daughter's family is British, and so I understand their humor and their some of their mannerisms. And so I mean, I was laughing a little bit at that. Like, we had a word with the police and they spoke to us, and I thought, oh gosh, you wouldn't see that in America, but it was quite funny.
well, it's interesting that the civil authorities actually know what to talk about. Enforcement is a thing here, right? We actually have a lack of enforcement, I would say. And although we've done a good job educating public safety officials about drones, does every public safety official know whether or not a person could be flying in this area? And we've seen a lot of kind of hiccups with pilot interaction on that level, because usually both are uninformed by the time that meeting happens, right? I can fly anywhere I want. My rights are intact, and the cop, it's looking to some local mandate that doesn't pass federal kind of oversight at all, saying no, you can't fly here. And technically, the pilot's right, but he doesn't know why. So that's an interesting situation that can kind of occur.
Well, and you think of the Michigan Coalition of Drone Operators in Genesee County, where MCDO was recently victorious because Genesee County tried to establish their own ordinance against the state legislature. They failed to do that, but again, Jason was arrested and his gear was confiscated. Then he was let go. But they were so mad, they were able to acquire Dean Greenblatt's attorney services pro bono and fight that. And that was a good thing. But there's another issue, too, that you run into. What if local law enforcement and the county itself tries to override something on a state level?
States' rights versus the federal government. Probably a topic too deep for everybody here.
I was going to say, that's a topic that's obviously relevant right now. Yeah.
Well, and I think the last thing that I might mention on this is that it does really highlight that there are kind of two different types of drone operators. There are the people that are, a dentist or a pub owner that just see the drone as a tool to accomplish kind of a one-off type of task, and they don't necessarily know the regulations, and so to them, if they can make it happen, then it's something that they're willing to do. And I think that just is a real big contrast between more of the enterprise type of folks, where if they're not doing it correctly and safely and compliantly, it's really kind of a non-starter. And the drone is really something that they're using to accomplish a specific task versus someone who's just seeing if it works.
Yeah, so the clueless segment, as we often hear them referred to.
Yes, the well-meaning but somewhat clueless.
Yeah. Do we have any more articles, CJ?
We have one more to touch on quickly. So the disinfectant drone is back in the news. I know we've talked about this a little bit on our podcast, but specifically this is from Eaglehawk, and they are talking about how their drones can spray chemicals over stadiums, concert venues, etc., to rid them of germs, bacterias, and hopefully kind of speed up and advance the process of reopening some of these venues. What are some of your guys' thoughts on this? Is this something we can expect to see? Is this something we're excited to see? Is this going to be an actual kind of permanent fixture in the cleaning and disinfecting of large buildings?
Yeah, I mean, if you think right now when you go to a grocery store, they have the disinfecting wipes. If you go to Trader Joe's, they have a system where they are using sanitary wipes to disinfect the shopping carts, and then they have a row there. Everyone's waiting in line, socially distancing responsibly. But I think it gives a lot of people the peace of mind knowing that there has been some disinfectant applied to something that they are about to touch. There's been some backlash on it, but I think for outdoor venues especially, it is a quick and efficient way to give people that peace of mind when they start reconvening in large groups.
Yeah, so I think last time you were on, actually, this sort of came up as a use case that was just making headlines. So I guess the questions that still need to be answered is, toxicity, parts per million, like how often are we doing this? Efficiency, it probably helps in those larger outside venues, let's say like a Central Park kind of theater. But is it really made for indoor use? I don't know. We'll see. And then the other thing is, are there alternative technologies that are less complicated and don't require access to airspace? So those are all the things that kind of got to be rolled into whether or not this becomes scalable or just the drone use of the moment.
Yes.
What are the legalities? So if I was flying the drone within a stadium that has a covered roof, am I still in the airspace technically?
You are technically, I think, flying indoors, and there you have it. That's an interesting point. I wish someone from Eaglehawk was on this because they know those rules thoroughly. But no, I guess technically that is indoor use.
Those were the first two questions that popped into my mind when I read this was, the two things that popped into my mind are they're flying indoors and they're also spraying chemicals. And those are both two really interesting areas that the FAA has had to address. I would love to talk to someone from Eaglehawk. I think that my interpretation of this is that they are flying indoors and therefore some of the regs don't apply to them. Obviously, if it was an outdoor stadium, things would be different. But they're also applying chemicals from a drone, and so that that brings up just an interesting point of there are other regulations that this might trigger beyond just the airspace flying indoors part of it, and that has to do with applying chemicals and. I do think if it helps sports come back quicker, I'm pretty favorable.
Regulation be damned.
Well,
I would never say that, but if it helps sports come back quicker, I'm interested in hearing it out.
Okay. I will say I'm very familiar with Eaglehawk, and I'm friends with the co-founders, and they are the type of people that are on top of regulations. They have the proper waivers to operate. So that wasn't a concern that ever popped into my mind. And so
they've thought it out. That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, no, they absolutely do. And, I think they are the leading West New York drone services business, but they are for a reason, because they don't just go out and operate. They have the proper waivers and documentation in place. They know what they're doing. And I just know this from experience. I feel like I know that they're doing this properly, safely, legally. I read something on Twitter the other day, Dave Grohl of Foo Fighters saying, we have to bring live music back somehow. It just has to come back together. And it made me sad. And so any type of solution that makes especially live outdoor concerts possible again, or even in indoor venues, anything that makes something that magical possible again. Let's explore it. Let's see how we can make it possible.
Of all the COVID-related use cases, this was the one, even when we first brought it up, that we kind of felt most comfortable with as actually having utility versus, the temperature reading, which, there's probably not enough data to really kind of support anything other than test deployments of that. And I'm not betting on it, but this, we know how these chemicals react. We actually know how much we're supposed to put down already. And if you're saying that they figured out, that kind of regulatory tightrope to make this use case possible, cheers to them for walking it and giving us a new kind of avenue.
Yeah,
drone use.
They did consult with the Environmental Protection Agency too. I read that as well in some of the coverage. So yeah, they're not just going about it blindly. They are trying to stay on top of, which chemicals are the most effective and least harmful. And
maybe it'll provide test data for spraying that'll kind of help agriculture regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, this story is definitely kind of the type that I like to see, something that will truly be made more efficient by using drones rather than just using drones to, to approach the problem. Like I can definitely see, kind of to use Mike's temperature taking example, this is something that is truly could be used in a lot of different use cases and really could be done in a lot more efficient of a manner than, sending dozens or hundreds of people out into a stadium to clean things. And so this is the type of thing I like to see where using a drone is something that is really making a job more efficient and is something that can be scaled so that those type of things are able to continue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things about this moment in time. I think there's going to be an actual physical need for safety or mental need for safety. And why should we put cleaning crews on the front lines of this? They don't get paid a lot.
Good point. Yeah.
I'd rather send a drone. That's a job I actually don't want to return to the economy if we could eliminate it and keep people safer. Because most of those people don't have great health insurance. Most of those people aren't getting paid well for what would now be a sacrifice in potential health risk, whereas we wouldn't think of that in that way kind of prior to COVID.
Yeah, it's the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous. I think that's something that we see a lot, especially from our customers, is they're using drones when they're trying to approach something that is one of those three. Areas.
Mm-hmm. Right. And who knows what technology might come in the future. I know we've seen articles that maybe ultraviolet rays can be used to combat viruses or kill different types of germs. So, who knows what may happen in the next 2, 3, 4, 6 months. Maybe that we can equip these drones that are flying indoors with some ultraviolet technology and kind of zap the germs that way. So
you just took the thoughts out of my head because I was just thinking next ultraviolet has been a proven method.
Yeah, we're seeing that in airports rather than them using chemicals. They're starting to use something between a Zamboni and a Roomba with ultraviolet lights to clean the airports. So we'll see. We'll see. I think this is ultimately good that we're seeing positive use cases related to COVID that aren't just like, well, I could use a drone for that kind of use cases.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they'll have an ultraviolet sensor to put on the new DJI drone.
There we go.
See, they failed on the Matrice 300. They could have had that.
Next on the roadmap.
Yeah, they could add it on later.
I do know that people from DJI listen to this podcast, so maybe they're going to give you some credit for it.
Actually, I kind of got a hint of that when I saw their proposed outline. Should I use a drone for this?
Yeah.
I felt like we were talking about that exact thing 2 days earlier. Great minds think alike, though. We actually were recording while they were probably putting that together, so.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We are back. I have a couple of quick questions for our guest today, Andrew Elefant of Kittyhawk. So, Andrew, thanks again for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into the UAS industry, kind of how your career took you to where you are today, and then tell us a little bit about Kittyhawk and your role there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I took a little bit of an unusual journey into the UAS industry. So I got into this about 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, while I was finishing up and just graduating from law school in San Francisco. But I've been around aviation since I was a kid. My grandfather was in the Air Force, and my father's a longtime private pilot. So I actually grew up flying small planes in Northern California. I got my private pilot license and my instrument rating when I was in high school, and my multi when I was in college. And so, my journey into the UAS portion of this was really kind of a combination of my background in aviation and as a pilot. And so after how I got into this was after law school, I was working for a think tank in San Francisco that did a lot of work around technology policy called the Startup Policy Lab. And there I was working on a lot of technology and government issues like smart cities, data privacy, and also UAS adoption and use by governments, particularly cities. And while I was in that role, I actually met Josh Ziering, one of Kittyhawk's co-founders, at an event in San Francisco, and kind of got to know the Kittyhawk team over time. And I joined the company about 2 years ago.
Great. And what do you do there? What's, I guess, a typical day like for you? I know no day is probably typical anymore, but talk to us about your role there and what you focus on.
Sure. So I guess to kind of zoom out for just a second. So Kittyhawk's an enterprise software company in San Francisco. And what the company does is powers a drone operations platform for enterprise drone programs to scale and manage their drone operations. And so we power drone operations for some really large companies so that they can do their work efficiently, safely, securely, and compliantly in industries like insurance and media and power lines and utilities and things like that. And I guess the reason I mentioned that is my role is really to help the company and our customers navigate the regulatory environment that they operate in and that an enterprise drone program faces. And so I use a lot of my background as a lawyer, a pilot, a technology policy researcher, a compliance consultant in my role at Kittyhawk. So, I wear a lot of different hats so I help the company comply with FAA regulations, advocate for regulations that allow our customers to do more with their drones. I play a part in the company's participation in FAA programs like Lance and Before You Fly, which Kittyhawk runs with the FAA. And then I do a lot of work helping our customers navigate FAA regulations and how those regulations interact with and affect their operations depending on what industry they're in. Kittyhawk has enterprise customers doing mission critical work in a bunch of heavily regulated industries that are heavily regulated for reasons that have nothing to do with drones. And so when you add in the fact that they're using, that they're adopting drones in great numbers and are scaling up big programs in industries like power generation and infrastructure and insurance, there's just a lot to wade through on how to safely and compliantly operate these operations. So, my role kind of ties a lot of those areas together.
Right. I mean, regulation is obviously such a big part of this industry, and I think right now, especially, is just a really interesting time for regulation. We've seen a number of things happen over the past couple of months, which have been interesting. We've seen a BVLOS waiver granted to an inspection company from the FAA during the coronavirus. We've seen, as we kind of spoke about earlier, we've seen a number of companies experimenting with different delivery options. But we notably have seen companies like CVS, UPS, Drone Up deliver prescriptions in different jurisdictions. How are you seeing coronavirus impact regulation? And are any of these changes here to stay? Do we think some of this, are we seeing some kind of temporary waivers or temporary allowances in the regulatory landscape that the FAA is maybe doing for companies to help during the time of the virus? What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think the short answer is the whole coronavirus situation that we're in has impacted regulation in a whole bunch of industries. A whole bunch of industries, the drone industry included. And because this is such an uncharted territory, I think a lot of industries are really trying to figure out how to adjust to this new environment. I think, as you said, there's definitely a question of kind of, is this a temporary thing, or are we kind of at the start of a shift into how we do things? As far as the drone regulation side of things go, coronavirus has absolutely impacted, in a lot of ways, the normal way of doing things, and has forced the FAA and companies to adjust. My opinion, I think that some of the use cases that are being pushed forward and are being accelerated because of coronavirus are probably here to stay. I think that, you mentioned the BVLOS waivers and drone delivery, accelerating. And I think that's not only true, but I think that is here to stay. And, it's obviously there's a lot of hardship around the coronavirus, and it's impacting people in very profound ways. But I'm excited by the idea that this is one of those situations that really provides a lot of opportunities to use drones in a very in a way that increases safety and efficiency, and so in some ways I'm excited that this is that, like, the FAA is fast tracking some things, and I'm encouraged by the fact that we're for such a safety conscious industry, that we are willing to explore some ways that truly will help people, and I think that there's some type of activities like prescription drug delivery, insurance inspections, things like that if you can remove the person out of the loop, you've unlocked not only efficiency, but the ability to do it safer. And in these times with less human to human interaction, some of these I think are I think here to stay.
Right.
I have a quick question. Is the FAA responding a lot quicker, significantly faster to some requests in your experience during this pandemic compared to before?
I think that I think the FAA is moving a little bit more quickly on approving some things. I think if you go and look at the FAA website, they have a whole list of regulatory changes and regulatory advances that they've pushed forward as part of their response to coronavirus. Anecdotally, I haven't noticed any slowdown in terms of waivers being approved or things like that. And I think anecdotally, I've heard that that some of that is moving quicker because it is seen as a high priority now to not let red tape stand in the way of doing things that are either life-saving or are really going to increase safety for people who might be part of that operation otherwise. So I've been pretty encouraged with what I've seen from the FAA that they do have to think things through and they're not going to go off without doing their homework and really thinking through all the ways that this, that their regulatory changes or approvals could do things. I think a good example of that we can talk about is the Part 107 recurrency part of things where sure, I think it took a little bit longer to get those guidelines than I think some folks would have liked. But it was a really comprehensive thing that affected a lot of different operators. So it wasn't something that they could just rush out the door. And so I think the FAA has done a good job of walking that line and reacting to what's the reality of the situation while also following their mandate of being a safety first organization.
Right. On the note of the FAA, testing centers all over the country closed. We've heard that if you are needing to take the Part 107 exam for your first time, you're kind of out of luck. Now, if you need to renew your 107, there are ways to go about that. What have you noticed kind of around the country, and how is the closing of these testing centers really affecting kind of the industry, affecting professionals who are doing this for a living, and if they can't get their 107 renewed, this is their job. And then, if we can't create any new Part 107 certified pilots, none of them can take the tests. Are we going to have almost a shortage of pilots in the next 12 months or so? And what does that look like?
So to answer your final question, I think there could be a shortage of current Part 107 pilots in the next 6 to 12 months based on what the reality of the situation is and the fix that was put forth by the FAA for no other reason. There are other reasons, but primarily it's because, as you mentioned, you're really out of luck if you're trying to get your Part 107 certificate right now. Sure, there's been a fix issued for a small group of Part 107 pilots whose recency of knowledge expired in the last few months or will this spring. But the reality of the situation is a large majority of testing centers are closed. There are a few that are open, but they are very few and far between. And I don't know that they have the capacity to deal with the number of people that need to go and recertify and pass their recurrent knowledge test. I do think this is a potential issue because if you're an enterprise drone program and you suddenly have more work to do, the availability of a certain number of pilots just isn't there. So if you have people that want to that want to join the industry, it's a lot harder to do that right now. And that new guidance that was issued last week, or 10 days ago or so, doesn't really address that. But I was really happy to see that the FAA did go into that and did offer a path forward for people who aren't able to get into a testing center right now to do their knowledge test. And it's definitely an issue that I'm following pretty closely, because it really it's a really central issue to operating a drone program. Is, can you onboard new pilots? Can you keep your current pilots current? And if not, what do you do? And so there has been a lot of discussion around how to keep these people in the fold, how to keep skilled people employed and current, and do so in a way that keeps everyone compliant for safety reasons, for insurance and business reasons. There's a lot there.
Right. Can somebody go across state lines to a different testing center that may be open, especially as states start to reopen?
Yeah, as far as my understanding is that you could do that. You could go to a different state. I don't think, don't take this as the gospel, but I don't think the FAA really has an opinion on where you take your knowledge test, as long as it's in an FAA testing, an FAA approved testing center. I think the more difficult part of that is just how many people are really willing to get on a plane or get in their car for hours to go and do this. Do you have to, if you have to make a big travel arrangement to renew your certificate and get that knowledge test done, I think some people, that's a cost benefit thing that some people are going to have to grapple with. But that's just not a sustainable. It's just not a sustainable solution. Especially if, maybe I'm a little bit sensitive to it because I'm in California, but it takes 4 hours to drive to the next state. There's.
Or just within California, like across the Bay Bridge. No, sorry. Traffic is pretty horrendous in California most of the time now.
Right.
Yeah. But I think people will get creative in terms of, you may see something like that. People traveling to take a testing center because they have no other choice. They need to be current so that they can legally continue to do their job.
I have a question for you, since how the FAA operates in and out pretty much. When you get your recurrent exam and they print out that sheet and say, don't lose this, you don't get that the first time around. You're in the IACRA system and you get your UAS card. Why doesn't the FAA just update their system? Why do you need to keep this piece of paper with you to prove that you have passed your recurrent exam?
I think part of the reason why you need to keep a printed out piece of paper that says that you've passed your recurrent exam, I think in some ways that's not for the FAA's benefit. That's for the benefit of law enforcement on the ground, or like a FSDO, an inspector type of thing. I think that's a whole other conversation about the FAA updating their systems and things like that. A lot of this has been around for a long time, so I think it's a little bit difficult to overhaul that. But that is a really good point. It is important for you to have that printed out piece of paper that shows that you have passed the recurrent test, because your certificate, the plastic certificate that you get, it just shows the date issued. And in in the Part 61 community, that's also all you ever get. You keep records in your logbook of when a CFI signs you off, which is in some ways the equivalent in the Part 61 world of showing and demonstrating that you have your knowledge current. And so this is, in some ways, this is the same thing as other pilots being required to keep their CFI endorsement in their logbook. It's both because the system's designed that way, and also so that someone who's outside of the system doesn't have to go and get inside the system to figure out whether you're flying compliantly.
Yeah, it's back to the testing centers. It's just really interesting. I wonder if there's pressure on the FAA, especially as we're seeing more use cases for drones kind of during the pandemic. And if we do start to see a shortage of pilots, I wonder if if there's pressure on them to either have an alternative testing method, whether they could do something online or even start to reopen some of these centers, even if the rest of the state is closed, or just have kind of a fast-tracked way for people to get certified and fly compliantly.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see that. I think one of the issues with that is that a lot of these testing centers are approved by the FAA, but they're not run by the FAA. They're, a large majority of them are operated by a private company that. So it's not the FAA's decision to close the testing centers.
Right.
It's the company that operates a lot of the testing centers, and that's really just dependent on the state. On the state regulation. So,
right.
Whether that's classified as an essential business and things like that, and whether there's liability issues of bringing people into a testing center, there's a lot there to.
Right.
There's a lot there to go into, but I think the other answer to your question is if this drags on long enough, I think that this is a question that is going to need to be addressed because there needs to be some way. And I was happy to see that the FAA was willing to let a certain subset of Part 107 operators take the online test. That's usually reserved for the Part 61 community. I liked seeing that. I think it was, a good call to utilize something that's already there and available online. So, I don't think that either one of those tests are quite as, are a sufficient alternative for that. Because you have to keep in mind that the people that are taking those online tests, they've already passed ground school for, to get their pilot's license. So, that course is a bit of a refresher with some of the extra Part 107 specific operational regulation. But if you don't have that baseline of knowledge coming at it from an aviation standpoint, there's more to test on. And so there isn't as much of a direct equivalent out there. But in time, I would love to see the FAA be able to offer some of these tests online. I think it would just make everything, just one other way of doing it in an efficient manner.
Right. And maybe if there's the hands-on portion, maybe they do that over Zoom, or they come up with a new creative way to be able to test it. Yeah.
I mean, I think we're all being forced to grapple with how to use the technology we have to fulfill some of these requirements.
I would imagine an online test would have to be timed though, so people don't have time to go Google if they don't know. Sorry.
Right.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, there's all sorts of considerations for.
Don't like me. I'm just,
And they have to prove you're actually taking the test, right? I could sign up for it, and I could have Andrew take my Part 107 for me.
Oh, and we'd all get 100%. But no.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, we've been kind of in the nitty gritty. Let's take a big, giant step back. no pun intended, but what, if anything, do you think is holding the broader industry back, the broader UAS industry with regards to adoption and kind of mass integration?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I touched on part of this a little bit earlier, which is the regulation has to. I mean, and I know that this is kind of a common refrain, but regulation has to keep pace with the technology and innovation and imagination of what people are doing. Like I said earlier, especially in response to the pandemic and just because there's a lot of creative people out there, people are doing a lot of creative and innovative things with drones. They're trying to solve novel, complex problems. And the regulation needs to, if you get into too much of a regulatory black hole, there's just not enough guidance to figure out exactly where you should be going. And I think that gives some people pause in pushing the envelope. If it's something that is so far outside the regulations or just isn't something contemplated by the regulations. So I think that that is, that's an ongoing battle that occasionally does hold the industry back. But I think that as we've discussed, I think part of those barriers are being removed because I think that there is more of an appetite to. I think there's more of an appetite from the regulation side of things to say, bring me your proposed operation, bring me your safety case, explain how you can do this in a safe manner, and we'll talk. So. I think that's something that I've seen as a positive step is regulators being willing to operate more as a partner with companies. I mean, I'm seeing some of this in in terms of beyond visual line of sight ops. Presenting a safety case to do that is challenging. And presenting a safety case in any advanced operation is challenging, but if the motto is bring me your safety case and show that you've thought this through, I think that really that's a way to keep the industry from being held back, because sure, the dentist who's trying to deliver their prescriptions, they probably aren't going to be able to tell the FAA a safety case that will move the needle. But a more advanced, sophisticated enterprise drone program who's more professional, more knowledgeable, and is more concerned with following all of the regulations and doing their operations compliantly. Those type of folks, I think, are the ones who are going to be able to push the industry, put the industry forward.
Right. Yeah, it is just an interesting, albeit small, but a silver lining kind of to the pandemic, as we're seeing some interesting use cases for the industry. We're seeing the FAA move quickly and seem to listen a little bit more to some of the big industry players. So yeah, it's, it changes every day now, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few months. So
yeah, there's never a dull moment.
Right.
So we're, yeah, there's never a dull moment. We're definitely still trying to figure things out.
Right. Well, great. I want to thank you guys again for joining us this week. I know we ran a little bit long, so thank you both for staying. How can people get in touch with you, Andrew, to learn a little bit more? Get in touch with you and with Kittyhawk, and then Kara, same for you as well.
Sure. So www.kittyhawk.io is our website, and that's a great first step to learn more about the company and what we do and how we can help you. And personally, I'm Andrew at kittyhawk.io, and feel free to shoot me an email. And I'm also on Twitter at UAV Policy. So feel free to follow along there, and myself personally and Kittyhawk, we're always happy to talk to folks and see how we can help.
Great.
And I feel like most people just get in touch with me on my Instagram. So Instagram, Kara E. Murphy, that's Kara, E as in Echo, Murphy. I am in the process of updating my website, something I do every few years, just a little refresh. And that is almost complete. But for now, I get a lot of messages through Instagram or just my personal email, karaemurphy@gmail.com. And I can also be found on dpreview.com. I'm a contributing writer there, and I tend to get a lot of messages through there. So whichever you feel.
Great. Well, I'll put all the links in the description to the podcast. You can also read some of Kara's writing on the InterDrone website as well. So, well, thanks again, both of you guys, for joining. This podcast will be on the InterDrone website, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever pods are casted. So thank you both again, and we will see everybody next week.
Oh, thank you.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on.